please download TikTok to stay up to date with BLM protests because mainstream media is not doing a good enough job of covering the full story. Thank you! Hi, hello! Welcome to my little corner of the internet. So this past month, I decided to get into gardening. I started off with easy plants like basil and parsley. Then I decided to grow something like a butterfly pea plant. And I also planted up some oregano and lavender on the way. This video is basically going to cover everything that I learned. So up next, I will be showing you the first 15 days of my basil, parsley, and butterfly pea plant and their growth. It was a very gratuitous time. I enjoyed seeing it growing. It was very nice. Welcome to the voiceover. I ordered these basil and parsley seeds off of Etsy for way too much money, and right now I'm just starting through the drainage holes with some paper towels. By the way, please do not do this with paper towel. It will disintegrate in the water. Use a wet wipe. Now I am filling these pots with soil and moistening them. And here I am just filling up with basil, and then I thought, oh, you guys might like an up close and personal look at me planting these seeds. So here you go. I am planting parsley. I hope you enjoy watching a stranger put parsley seeds on a pot. You're welcome. And now I'm just topping off with soil. I honestly used way too much. You really only need a sprinkle because these seeds are so tiny. And here I am just moistening them again. Now it's just a waiting game for these two. My butterfly pea plant seeds came a little bit later. Here I am just nicking it. Nicking is a process where you just open the hard seed coat a little bit to make it easier for the water to get into the seed. And you just have to soak it overnight for at least 12 hours, but up to 24. And here I am actually individually picking up each seed. The next day, I soaked these seeds with some paper towel and water. Was it necessary to cut every single piece of paper and individually fit it to this tiny jar? Absolutely not. Do not waste your time like I did here. Just use one layer of Bounty and it does the same trick. A few days later, I am now sorting through all of the seeds, checking which ones germinated and which ones did not. By the way, I did try to put these seeds back in to see if they would germinate anymore. Unfortunately, that just led to a lot of moldy seeds, so do not do that, just toss them. And in the end, we were left with 5 seeds. So something that I've read online is that the radical, or where the point of the bean is supposed to be pointed downwards to prevent the inefficient growth. So for mine, since these have already sprouted, I'm going to be planting this one this side up because I'm assuming that, oh, there's hair on it. I'm assuming that this is probably the stem and this is where the leaves are gonna sprout from. So if you see this one, the thing with like nicking a bean preemptively is that you're going to kind of have to reorient them in a different way than what they would traditionally if you didn't nick them. At least that's what I'm assuming from what I read online. And here I am just filling the pot with soil. Did I actually go out of my way and buy potting soil for this? Yes, please buy potting soil. Gardening soil is not the right move. And I'm just placing the seeds like I said before, giving it a good water one last time, and now we just wait. Basil was one of the first to sprout. Here I am moving my grow light setup to fit the basil. This is really important because the second the first seed starts sprouting, pretty much all of the other ones are going to pop up soon right after, so you should get that under the light right away or else it might start to stretch and you don't want the seed to waste any energy like that. Basil is definitely one of the more satisfying plants to grow because it's so big and leafy and they're just such fast growers. Literally by the end of the 15 days, the smell of the basil was permeating my room and my dreams. whack. I mean, look how big and leafy that is. That's so satisfying. By the 15th day, I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to thin these out, because that's what I read in some online forums. So this is what happened after I gave it a good little harvest. But of course, do not waste your harvest. I decided to make a microgreen basil pesto. I will have the ingredients down below. Here I am just chopping everything up, which, just so you know, a food processor is basically a rotating knife. So giving it the zest and squeeze of a small piece of lemon, and then some nice Parmesan. Give it a good little mix. Add some of your olive oil until you get the right consistency. I definitely could have chopped all of the ingredients even more, but it's okay. I boiled up some pasta, mixed it in with the pesto, and here, a bite for you guys. Now, parsley is definitely one of the slower germinators. It takes around 14 to 21 days for it to germinate, which is double the time of basil. By the end of the 2 weeks, it was still not that impressive. The butterfly pea plant, unfortunately, out of the 5 that I potted, only 3 survived. This big one was really great, but this tiny one just came out upside down, which is crazy. This one was really satisfying to watch as well. It's a fast grower. Now, unfortunately,
chaos show.
I wasn't in my room almost all day. I didn't have the fan on, and as you know, in an attic it gets extraordinarily hot and humid. I came back upstairs that day to find my basil plant completely covered in fungus gnats. I felt like crying. Now I understand what all those farmers feel like. I hate fungus gnats, by the way. They're like absolutely the worst, especially since I live on an island. Fungus gnats are everywhere, and they're absolutely horrible, because if you walk through a swarm of them, it's like you feel it hitting your face, you think it went up your nose, and you might have eaten one. I guess the first lesson that I learned about gardening is that you should never overwater. Fungus gnats really love moist soil, and something to keep in mind is you have to consider the depth of a plant pot, right? So if you look at this versus this is obviously quite a bit shorter than this. The deeper your pot is, the more water it can hold because of the soil in there. Lesson number 2, do not use gardening soil for your pots. I read all those directions saying use potting soil, and you know what I did? I did not use potting soil. I used gardening soil. This was not gardening soil like from my backyard. It was from a bag in the shed. Gardening soil is not the same composition as potting soil for a reason. Hey guys, just hopping on here to really explain the difference between potting soil and garden soil. The contents of potting soil is very different from garden soil, because potting soil doesn't actually contain any true soil. It is sterile. It won't have any fungi or nematodes or what have you, and it's well draining because of the 2 ingredients, perlite and vermiculite. Garden soil does not have that, which is why garden soil does not have good drainage. Important to know the difference. Use potting soil for container gardening, garden soil for large scale projects. I learned this the hard way. Don't panic, because when I saw my basil plant completely covered in these disgusting little black flies, and by the way, since this setup is in my room, that means I was sleeping with those fungus gnats. What I did that the day after was throw out all of the infested soil. That is definitely like the quickest way you could, take care of the problem. But unfortunately, if you are growing stuff like seedlings, which have very delicate root systems, they could potentially not survive that entire process. So unfortunately, I had to toss the parsley in the end, even though I did repot it with new soil, because parsley has really shallow and sensitive root system. Instead of throwing out all that soil, what you could do is water that soil with this. This is mosquito bits. These are like pieces of corn cereal that have something called BTI in them. And BTI, I cannot pronounce the word, but I will put it up here, is a type of bacteria that feeds only on mosquitoes, fungus gnats, and I think black flies. You can create a gnat tea out of this from what the Amazon review said. And that is where you take about a tablespoon of this cereal, poured into a glass of water like this. Take out the cereal after like 20 or so minutes, because at that point the bacteria is in the water. You do not have to keep that corn cereal thing, because what ends up happening is it gets really moldy and like not nice. So I do not like doing what the directions say, which is like sprinkle this on top of the soil. It gets moldy real quick. It's not cool. And you water your plants with this. I don't use like all of this gnat tea. I use like half regular water and half this, and I haven't had a fungus gnat problem. Another thing that I learned is, frankly, just ditch these traditional pots, like these nursery pots with the drainage holes, if you can, because you don't need to buy them for one thing. You could create self-watering planters using a water bottle. If you've bought a water bottle before in your life, and one of the 3 R's is reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. So it's really nice that you could reuse a water bottle to create a self-watering planter. So with this, I don't have to worry about watering the plant because it's already getting watered from the bottom, and it creates a perfectly moist, not overly damp soil. You just have to like fill the bottom reservoir whenever it gets like pretty low. I'm going to link below the video that I learned this trick from. Really awesome. I love it. Another thing I learned, so there's this thing called diatomaceous earth. It is a powder, like a white powder that is made from crushed up diatoms. This is what a lot of gardeners use to treat any kind of infestation, because diatomaceous earth is like walking on knives for insects. If your soil is still damp, like my soil was from the basil and parsley fiasco, that diatomaceous earth will clump up and not work, because once it gets wet, it doesn't work. The night when the basil fungus gnat fiasco happened, I covered all of my plants in diatomaceous earth. Unfortunately, because the soil was still wet, because I didn't wait for it to dry out, the top layer got super clumpy and didn't kill any fungus gnats. So when I woke up in the morning and went to check, there were still a bunch of fungus gnats flying around the thing. And that's when I panicked. Another thing I learned was with like my butterfly pea plants in particular, do not soak them for too long. They will grow mold. Right, so that is everything I learned in my first month of gardening. If you guys want a follow-up to this, please let me know. I really do love gardening. It is very de-stressing to focus on something that is not me and my imperfections. Yay. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Ryan Little.